What happens when the past intertwines with the present in a way that could change everything? Nicholas, a 14-year-old boy, carries the weight of a childhood marked by loss and loneliness. Since his mother passed away and his father disappeared, he found comfort in the love of his grandmother, Margaret. However, when her health begins to decline, Nicholas is forced to leave the home he has always known and be sent to an orphanage. With a heart full of hope, he decides to perform at a local restaurant, believing that his music can bring in the money needed for his grandmother's surgery. But one night, his voice touches not only the ears but also the hearts of those present, especially Roberta, a businesswoman who seems to recognize something familiar in him. Nicholas is a young dreamer, but also vulnerable, struggling to find his place in a world that seems to have turned its back on him. The restaurant where he sings becomes his stage, but also a battlefield where he faces his insecurities and fears. Each performance is a fight not only for financial survival but also in search of his identity. The environment around him is hostile, filled with looks of disdain and indifference, but he refuses to give up. His music is his only weapon, and he wields it with determination, even as doubts about his future haunt him. As Nicholas gains more admirers, Roberta finds herself intrigued by his presence. Her curiosity leads her to investigate the boy's story, and her feelings become complicated when she begins to suspect that he may be linked to the man she loved in the past, Andrew. Unaware of this connection, Nicholas continues to struggle on his journey, not knowing that his destiny is about to change drastically. What seemed like a simple musical performance transforms into a link between past and present, revealing secrets that have been buried for years. Roberta's quest for answers leads her to an impactful meeting with Margaret at the hospital, where the revelation of the truth becomes inevitable. What she discovers may not only unite a separated family but also transform Nicholas's life forever. Amidst tears and laughter, the story culminates in an emotional reunion where Roberta, Nicholas, and Margaret come together, ready to face an uncertain future but filled with hope. Margaret's surgery is scheduled, and with it, the lives of all begin to intertwine in a way they could never have predicted, bringing to light the strength of love and the importance of family. Nicholas felt like he was in a labyrinth. Each performance in the restaurant was a battle waged against the voices echoing in his mind, questioning his ability to move forward. He needed music to sustain him, but the weight of responsibility on his shoulders was almost unbearable. His grandmother's health was deteriorating, and the thought of losing another loved one terrified him. One night, as he prepared to sing, he noticed a group of teenagers at a table in the back, laughing and having fun. Their presence made him feel small and out of place. They were a constant reminder of everything he didn't have: friends, the lightheartedness of a carefree childhood. Nicholas took a deep breath, trying to push the negative thoughts away. He needed to focus on the music, but insecurity began to take hold of him. The fear of failure paralyzed him, and he almost gave up. It was at that moment that Clara, a restaurant staff member and one of the few people who always supported him, approached. Clara, with her caring and encouraging demeanor, always believed that Nicholas's music had the power to touch people. "You can do it, Nicholas. Just sing with your heart as you always have," she encouraged him. Her words ignited a small spark of courage within him. Nicholas took to the stage, and as he began to strum his guitar, the notes floated through the air, carrying his anguish away. He surrendered to the music and, for a few moments, forgot his worries. However, the night didn't end as he had hoped. After his performance, a man in a suit, who introduced himself as Enrique, approached him. Enrique was a well-known music producer in the city and had heard rumors about Nicholas's talent. He made a tempting proposal, an opportunity in a local music competition that could change the boy's life. But there was a price. He would have to leave the restaurant, and with it, the nights he could spend with his grandmother. Nicholas was torn. The idea of pursuing a dream lay before him, but Margaret's health remained a constant concern. Meanwhile, Roberta was increasingly intrigued by Nicholas. She decided to approach him after the show, but what should have been a friendly conversation quickly turned tense. Roberta, in her quest for answers about her past, realized that the questions she had about Andrew led her to a place where Nicholas could be the key. However, she found herself hesitating. How could she ask a boy who was fighting for his own life about a man who had been part of her story? Nicholas's internal conflict intensified. He felt torn between the possibility of achieving a dream and the need to care for his grandmother. The pressure mounted, and he began to feel isolated. On one of his hardest nights, he decided to visit Margaret in the hospital. Upon entering the room, he found his grandmother with a tired but still loving gaze. "Nicholas, I don't want you to give up your dreams for me," she told him, her voice soft and encouraging. But for him, this only added to the confusion. How could he move forward knowing she was fighting to stay well? Weeks passed, and the competition drew closer. The stress began to affect his performances at the restaurant. Clara noticed the change in his behavior and tried to intervene. "Nicholas, you can't let this pressure consume you. Remember why you started singing," she reminded him. But each day, the shadow of doubt grew. Nicholas began to question whether he was good enough, whether he truly deserved this chance, or if he should simply return to the solitude of the orphanage, where everything seemed simpler and without expectations. During one performance, something unexpected happened. As he played, he became distracted and forgot the lyrics. The audience fell silent, and his heart raced. He felt Roberta's gaze fixed on him, but he also saw the disappointed looks of some restaurant patrons. What should have been a moment of glory turned into a nightmare. He stepped away from the stage, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders, and almost allowed himself to give up. In that moment of weakness, Nicholas realized he needed support. The desire to open up to Roberta grew, but he hesitated. He felt vulnerable, fearing that by sharing his insecurities, she might see him as a failure. However, he was about to discover that amidst the chaos, true strength came from connecting with others. Thus, with his heart in conflict and his mind overflowing with doubts, Nicholas prepared to face the greatest challenge of his life, not only the competition but also the internal struggle to rediscover who he truly was. Nicholas felt as if he were caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The pressure of the competition was mounting, and each day he felt further away from his music and himself. At the restaurant, he tried to concentrate on his performances, but the memory of the lyrics he had forgotten still haunted him. The laughter of the teenagers, which had once bothered him, now felt like a distant echo of something he longed for: the freedom to be young and carefree. During one of his performances, he felt as if he were merely going through the motions, like an actor on a stage. He played the strings of the guitar, but his soul was not present. Clara, always attentive, noticed the change in his energy and decided to talk to him. "Nicholas, you need to remember what music means to you. It's not just about winning a competition, it's about expressing yourself," she said, her concern evident in her eyes. Those words penetrated his mind, but he still felt lost, as if navigating a sea of uncertainties. Meanwhile, Roberta continued to observe Nicholas from afar, intrigued by his talent and his internal struggles. She felt an inexplicable connection to him, but the idea of approaching him and discussing Andrew made her hesitant. With each passing day, she felt more drawn to him, but also guilt-ridden for wanting to unearth a past that could be painful for both. The pressure was mounting, and she decided that she needed answers, not just for herself but also to help Nicholas. In an act of courage, Roberta approached him after a tense performance. "Nicholas, are you okay? I noticed that something is bothering you," she asked, trying to break the ice. He hesitated, feeling the weight of the words he could not articulate. But instead of opening up, he just smiled weakly and said he was fine. Roberta, disappointed, stepped away, but not before noticing the sadness in his eyes. This left her even more determined to discover what lay behind that facade. Days turned into a succession of increasingly difficult performances for Nicholas. The pressure of the competition intensified, and he felt his strength waning. His grandmother's health worsened, and he visited the hospital every day, trying to be a source of hope for her even when he felt empty inside. During one of those visits, Margaret held his hand and said, "Nicholas, I will always be proud of you, no matter what happens. Follow your heart." Those words were a balm for him but also heightened his anxiety. How could he follow his heart knowing that she was struggling to be well? The competition was approaching, and Nicholas decided to rehearse at Clara's house, seeking a safe space to express his emotions. During the rehearsal, he began to play a new song he had written, a song about struggle and pain. But as the notes flowed, he felt suffocated by the intensity of the emotions that arose. He stopped, the guitar slipped from his hands, and frustration took over. Clara, noticing his despair, tried to comfort him. "Nicholas, it's normal to feel this way. Sometimes, we need to fail to learn how to get back up again." He looked at her, recognizing the wisdom in her words, but still struggling to accept that failure could be part of his path. The idea of failing in the competition terrified him, and he felt increasingly trapped in a cycle of doubts. On the eve of the competition, Nicholas decided he needed some time alone. He went to the park where he used to play guitar when he was younger. He sat on a bench and watched the people around him. They laughed and played carefree. Sadness enveloped him, and he felt on the brink of collapse. The music he once loved now felt like a burden. The weight of responsibility and expectation crushed him, and he wondered if he truly had what it took. Meanwhile, Roberta, concerned about Nicholas, decided to look for him. She found him sitting on the bench, his head in his hands. "Nicholas, I was looking for you. Can we talk?" She approached him, and he lifted his head, surprised to see her there. He hesitated, but the sincerity in her gaze encouraged him to open up. He spoke about his insecurities, about the competition, about his grandmother, and the fear of failure. Roberta listened attentively, and in the end, shared her own struggles and doubts about Andrew. The conversation between them turned into a moment of true connection and friendship. Nicholas realized he was not alone in his struggle. Roberta's words inspired him to see that facing his fears was part of the journey and that failures would not define his worth. Together, they decided that regardless of what happened in the competition, the important thing was to move forward with courage and hope. That night, as he prepared for the competition, Nicholas felt a new determination. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face any challenge that came his way, not just for the music, but for himself and for the people he loved. The journey wouldn't be easy, but now he had someone by his side, which made everything a little more bearable. On the morning of the competition, Nicholas woke up with a weight on his chest. The sun shone brightly, but he felt as if he were wrapped in dark clouds. He got up, looked in the mirror, and saw a face he didn't recognize. Deep circles under his eyes and a tired expression reflected weeks of pressure and uncertainty. He remembered his grandmother's words and the support from Clara and Roberta, yet still, the fear of failure consumed him. When he arrived at the competition venue, the atmosphere was filled with talented young people, all eager to showcase their skills. The buzz of laughter and conversation filled the air, but for Nicholas, everything felt distant. He sat in a corner, watching others prepare, each with their dreams and hopes. The competition was an opportunity to shine, but also a battleground where failure could be devastating. Beside him, Roberta was getting ready, her vibrant energy contrasting with Nicholas's apathy. She noticed his lack of enthusiasm and approached him. "Hey, are you ready? Remember, it's just a performance. What matters is how you feel when you play," she said, trying to lift his spirits. Nicholas forced a smile, but the truth was that he felt more lost than ever. The competition began, and participants were called one by one. When it was Nicholas's turn, his heart raced. He stepped onto the stage, holding his guitar as if it were a shield. The audience was eager, and he could feel the anticipation in the air. But as he looked at the unfamiliar faces in the crowd, everything he had practiced seemed to vanish. He started to play, but the music that had once been an extension of his soul now sounded strange and lifeless. The notes came out choppy and hesitant, and the feeling of sinking overwhelmed him. Then, something unexpected happened. During the performance, his guitar made a discordant sound, and he stopped, completely paralyzed. The silence in the room was deafening. He looked at the audience and saw confused and disappointed looks. The weight of failure crashed down on him, and shame spread like a wave. What should have been a moment of glory had turned into a catastrophe. Nicholas felt tears welling up in his eyes, but he fought against them. He didn't want to show weakness. Determined not to let the situation worsen, he took a deep breath and tried to resume the music, but the pressure was unbearable. The sensation of failure engulfed him, and in a moment of impulse, he abandoned the stage. The murmurs of the audience turned into gasps of surprise. Nicholas ran away, his heart racing uncontrollably. He couldn't see where he was going. All that mattered was getting away from that place. He found a quiet corner, out of sight, and let himself break down. Tears streamed down his face as he tried to process what had happened. The competition, which should have been a moment of achievement, had now turned into a nightmare. The pressure, the expectations, everything he had built crumbled in seconds. He felt like a failure, an imposter. Meanwhile, Roberta, who had witnessed the disaster, felt her heart ache. She remembered their conversations and how he always seemed so strong, even amidst difficulties. Without hesitation, she set out to find him. When she found him, he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. "Nicholas," she called softly, sitting down beside him. "I saw what happened. I'm so sorry." He lifted his head, his eyes red and filled with pain. "I can't do this, Roberta. I'm a failure. I don't deserve to be here," he said, his voice trembling. Roberta felt a wave of empathy. "You are not a failure. We all face difficulties. No one is perfect, and that's okay. What matters is how you rise from all of this." She paused, looking into his eyes. "Nicholas, music should come from your heart, not from a competition. You love to play, and that's what really matters." Her words began to penetrate his mind. He realized he had put all his self-worth in the hands of that competition. He was so focused on winning that he had forgotten what he truly loved. The music, the connection it brought, the freedom of expression. The competition was just a part of his journey, not the final destination. Nicholas took a deep breath, feeling the pressure slowly dissipate. He looked at Roberta, who was gazing at him with understanding and support. "You're right," he finally said. "I let the fear of failure control me. Music shouldn't be a prison." Roberta smiled, relieved to see him starting to recover. Exactly. Music is about you, about your experiences. Don't let fear or competition take that away from you. With a renewed sense of purpose, Nicholas stood up. He still felt the weight of failure, but now there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you, Roberta. I'll remember that. No matter what happens, I'll play for myself. She hugged him, and he felt the strength of their friendship. Together, they returned to the competition venue, ready to face whatever came next. Nicholas knew that regardless of the outcome, he had found something far more valuable than a prize: the courage to be true to himself. Nicholas and Roberta returned to the competition venue, and he felt lighter after their conversation. However, insecurity still lingered over him. As he entered the room, the atmosphere was still charged with anxiety and expectation. He could hear the applause and laughter of the other participants, who seemed so confident. The music still echoed in his mind, a reminder of what he had momentarily lost. As he walked, Nicholas spotted Clara, who was sitting in one of the chairs, her eyes fixed on a competitor's performance. When she noticed Nicholas, she smiled, but there was concern in her gaze. She stood up and approached him. "Nicholas, are you okay? I saw what happened. It was really hard to watch." He hesitated, the words feeling heavy in his mouth. "I really thought I could do this, but I let fear take over. I felt like a failure." The confession came out as a whisper, and he looked down at the floor, feeling shame tighten in his chest again. Clara looked at him with understanding. "Everyone has bad days. The important thing is that you got back up. That shows strength. Don't define yourself by a single moment." Her words brought some comfort, but insecurity still lingered. What he wanted more than anything was to feel secure again, but the competition seemed to have turned into a minefield of emotions. With a nod, he thanked Clara and walked away, seeking a quiet place. He sat in a corner, picking up his guitar. Feeling the cold wood under his hands calmed him a bit. He began to play some soft notes, trying to reconnect with the music, but the memory of what had happened on stage still tormented him. Meanwhile, Roberta was by his side, watching him closely. "Nicholas, you need to understand that music is a journey. Sometimes you'll stumble. What matters is how you get back up and continue the walk." He looked at her, recognizing the wisdom in her words, but the internal struggle was intense. What if I stumble again? What if I fail again? The doubt slipped from his lips, and he felt vulnerable expressing it. Yes, it can happen, but it can also be that you surprise yourself. What matters is that you are having fun and learning from each experience, Roberta replied, with an encouraging look. Nicholas knew she was right, but the idea of exposing himself again made him nervous. In the days that followed, Nicholas struggled to deal with the emotional aftermath of that disastrous performance. The confidence he had in music began to waver. He spent hours practicing, trying to remember the joy that music had brought him before. But every time he thought of the competition, fear became a shadow that followed him. He decided to sign up for a performance at a local event, something smaller where he could feel more comfortable. However, as the day approached, anxiety grew. He remembered the people staring at him, the feeling of failure, and it made him want to give up. One night, while practicing in the yard, his grandmother appeared. She watched him for a moment before sitting down beside him. "Nicholas, you seem worried. What's going on?" He sighed, feeling the weight of the words. "Grandma, I had a performance and it didn't go well. I felt so bad, like I had disappointed everyone." Frustration overflowed, and he couldn't hide the pain he felt. She smiled gently, placing her hand over his. "My dear, you have never disappointed anyone. We all face challenges. What you need to remember is that music is a part of who you are, not a reflection of what others think. Don't be afraid to show your heart. Those words penetrated deep into his soul. Nicholas realized that music was more than just a performance. It was an expression of his essence. He needed to free himself from external pressure and play for the love of the art. On the eve of the event, he decided he would perform. It didn't matter what the outcome was. He just wanted to play. As he stepped onto the stage, he felt the pressure still there, but there was a new determination within him. He remembered Roberta's words and his grandmother's wisdom. When he began to play, the music flowed like a calm river. He let himself be carried away by the notes and emotions. The audience was there, but at that moment he didn't care. He was playing for himself, rediscovering the joy he had lost. And at the end, when the applause echoed, he smiled genuinely. Nicholas knew there would still be challenges ahead, but now he was more prepared to face them. He had found a way back to music and, above all, to himself. Nicholas was determined to face his fears. The performance he had ahead was an opportunity for redemption, but anxiety still accompanied him like a shadow. He had spent days reclusive, practicing his guitar, trying to reconnect with the music that once brought him so much joy. He knew he needed to overcome the insecurity that consumed him, and for that, he decided to open up to the support of those around him. That day, he remembered his grandmother's words, which always encouraged him to see music as an expression of who he was. He also recalled the conversations with Clara and Roberta, which helped him realize that fear was a natural part of the process. With that in mind, he began to accept that he didn't need to be perfect, he just needed to be true to himself. Upon arriving at the event venue, Nicholas felt his heart race. The room was filled with people chatting, laughing, and preparing to perform. He looked around at the faces and saw the same mix of nervousness and excitement he felt. This made him realize that everyone there faced their own internal battles. The connection with those who also dreamed and fought for their art brought some comfort. When it was his turn to step onto the stage, he took a deep breath and remembered everything he had learned. The bright lights blinded him for a moment, but he focused on the cold wood of the guitar and the notes dancing in his mind. As he began to play, something magical happened. The music flowed from his fingers, and gradually, the anxiety began to dissipate. He let himself be carried away by the melodies, and the audience, which had once seemed like a sea of strangers, became a safe space. Nicholas realized that the performance was not just about him. It was about the connection he could create with people. He remembered the stories his grandmother told about how music could touch hearts and bring people together. With each note, he felt freer, closer to who he really was. At the end of the performance, the applause echoed like a reflection of his own internal victories. He smiled, not just for the audience's approval, but for the feeling of having overcome his challenges. He had learned that failing did not mean being a failure, but rather an opportunity to start anew. Music, which had once made him anxious, was now a source of strength and joy. In the days that followed, Nicholas reflected on his experience. He realized that success was not measured solely by what others thought of him, but by the satisfaction and personal growth he was experiencing. The wealth he sought was in the lessons he learned along the way, in the friendships he cultivated, and in the courage to expose himself vulnerably. He began to apply what he had learned in his daily life. Instead of letting fear dominate him, he started to face new challenges with confidence. Conversations with Clara became deeper, and their friendship blossomed, with Nicholas feeling more comfortable sharing his insecurities. He realized that having someone by his side who understood his struggles made everything easier. Together, they supported and encouraged each other, creating a safe space to grow. Nicholas also began to help others who felt insecure about music. He offered to give lessons to children in the community, sharing his passion and experiences. By doing this, he not only helped others develop but also remembered his own journey. Every time he saw a smile on a student's face, he felt he was contributing to something greater than himself. Nicholas's transformation was not instantaneous but gradual. He learned to value every step he took, every note he played, and every friendship he nurtured. Music, which had once represented fear and insecurity, now became a symbol of overcoming and growth. He understood that true wealth lay in the experiences lived and the connections made along the way. And so, with a lighter heart and a more open mind, Nicholas continued his journey. He knew there would be new challenges ahead, but he also knew he had the strength and support needed to face them. The music now pulsed within him in a renewed way, and he was ready to touch his life with all its colors. Nicholas was about to face the greatest challenge of his life. After the performance that had helped him rediscover his passion for music, he signed up for a local contest that promised an invaluable opportunity, the chance to record his first album. However, what was supposed to be a new phase of excitement soon turned into a storm of insecurities. The level of the competitors was impressive, and the thought of comparing himself to them left him in a state of panic. In the days leading up to the contest, anxiety returned as a constant companion. Nicholas spent hours rehearsing, but with each passing day, he felt his hands trembling more as he played the strings. Clara and Roberta, always by his side, tried to encourage him, but doubt lodged itself in his heart. He wondered if he truly had what it took. What if he failed? What if no one liked his music? These thoughts tormented him. On the eve of the big day, he sat in his room, the guitar beside him. The sun was setting, casting a soft glow on the strings of the instrument. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, remembering his grandmother's words. "Music is an extension of your being, Nicholas. Don't worry about what others think. Be true." Hearing that in his mind, he decided he needed to free himself from the weight of expectation and fear. Finally, the day of the contest arrived. Nicholas arrived at the venue, an auditorium filled with anxious faces. The atmosphere was electrically charged. He watched the performances of other musicians, each bringing a part of their stories through music. With each note, he felt the weight of his own insecurity. But at the same time, there was a spark of hope beginning to ignite within him. He realized he was not alone. Everyone there was in search of something greater, just like him. When his name was called, Nicholas stepped onto the stage with trembling hands, but now he had a new determination. He remembered everything he had learned, that music was about connection, vulnerability, and above all, authenticity. He positioned himself in front of the microphone, looked out at the audience, and took a deep breath. The stage lights dazzled him, but instead of letting it overwhelm him, he sought the strength he had cultivated throughout his journey. The first notes came from the guitar like a whisper, and the audience immediately fell silent. He began to play a song he had written from the heart, a melody that reflected his struggles and victories. As the music flowed, the words became a catharsis. He spoke about the fears that paralyzed him, about the journey of rediscovery, and about the power of friendship. What had once been a burden became his greatest strength. As he sang, he saw Clara in the audience. She was smiling, full of pride. Roberta was nodding her head, keeping time with the music. Nicholas felt a warmth spreading through his chest. The connection he sought was there, among those who had always believed in him. The fear that once dominated him began to dissipate, and he let himself be carried away by the music, as if the stage were an extension of his soul. In the final moments of the performance, Nicholas paused. He looked out at the audience and, with a choked voice, said, "This song is for everyone who has ever felt insecure. Remember that you are not alone." The true richness of music lies in the courage to expose oneself and in the connection we create between us. The words echoed in the silence, and he began to play again, now with renewed intensity. When he finished, silence enveloped the auditorium, followed by thunderous applause. Nicholas felt emotion wash over him. He had overcome his greatest challenge, not just by performing, but by sharing his truth. He realized that, in that moment, it didn't matter whether he won or not. What mattered was the freedom he felt while playing. As he stepped off the stage, Nicholas was greeted by Clara and Roberta, who hugged him tightly. He knew he had won, not just by performing, but by rediscovering himself as an artist and as a person. The contest was merely a stage, but the lesson he had learned was eternal. He finally understood that true wealth was not in trophies but in the connections he had formed and in the courage to be true to himself. This transformation would be the foundation for everything that lay ahead in his musical journey and in life. After the performance, Nicholas felt a wave of relief and joy. The applause echoed in his ears, confirming that he had made the right choice by exposing himself. He stepped off the stage with a smile that reflected not only the satisfaction of the performance but also the liberation he felt. Clara and Roberta were waiting for him, their faces lit up with happiness. They hugged him tightly, and Nicholas realized that their support was as vital as the music he had just played. "You were amazing, Nicholas," Clara exclaimed, her eyes shining with emotion. "I've never seen you so genuine on stage. Your music touched all of us." Roberta nodded, still a bit breathless. "It was as if you were speaking directly to our hearts." "I'm so proud of you." Nicholas thanked them, feeling a bit shy but also deeply grateful. The feeling of having performed and connected with the people around him was indescribable. He realized that music was not just about winning a contest. It was about the ability to touch the lives of others and, at the same time, be touched by them. As the ceremony continued, with the judges deliberating on the winners, Nicholas found a quiet corner of the auditorium. He sat on a bench, still holding his guitar, and began to reflect on everything that had happened. The fear that had paralyzed him for so long now seemed a distant shadow. He remembered his grandmother and the words that had accompanied him throughout his journey. "Music is an extension of your being." He finally understood the true meaning of that. What if I fail? He thought again, but this time, the question didn't torment him. He had already overcome his greatest challenge, the internal battle against his insecurities. What mattered now was the path he would choose to follow from here. Nicholas smiled as he recalled all the moments that had led him to this point, the long hours of rehearsal, the conversations with Clara and Roberta, and the memories of his grandmother. All of it had shaped who he was. When the presenter finally announced the winners, Nicholas was prepared for any outcome. He wanted to celebrate what he had achieved, regardless of the trophy. When his name was called as one of the winners, he applauded along with the audience, but the emotion was not just in the victory. It was proof that his courage had been worthwhile. When receiving the award, he made a point to dedicate that moment to Clara and Roberta, who had always been by his side. "This award is ours. Without you, none of this would be possible," he said, his voice choked with emotion. The friends smiled, and tears of joy welled up in their eyes. They knew that this achievement was a reflection of the teamwork and unshakable friendship they had built. After the award ceremony, Nicholas felt that his life had changed. He was more confident and eager to explore new opportunities in music. Together with Clara and Roberta, he decided it was time to start working on his first album. Now, there was no room for fear or doubt. Music was a form of expression, and he was ready to share more of himself with the world. The journey wouldn't be easy, but Nicholas was determined. He knew he would face challenges, but he also understood that each one would be an opportunity for growth. Looking to the future, he felt grateful for the lessons he had learned and for the people who had always been by his side. That day, as he walked home with his friends, Nicholas realized that music was not just a passion but a fundamental part of who he was. More importantly, he understood that true victory lay in the courage to show oneself and connect with others. The road ahead was full of possibilities, and he was more than ready to embrace them. What mattered, after all, was that he was prepared to be genuine, both in music and in life. Nicholas walked through the illuminated streets of the city, accompanied by Clara and Roberta, his inseparable friends. The feeling of accomplishment still pulsed in his heart, like the melody of a song that would not fade away. He looked at the two, realizing how the journey they had shared had transformed him in ways he had never imagined. The insecurities that had tormented him before now seemed to belong to another time, to a Nicholas he barely recognized. Winning the contest was indeed an achievement, but the true transformation lay in the lessons he had learned. Along the way, he understood that success was not just about trophies or recognition, but about the courage to be authentic. He had exposed himself, revealing his vulnerabilities through music, and by doing so, he not only touched the lives of others but also found himself. Music, once a source of fear, was now his ally, a means of communication that transcended words. Nicholas remembered the nights he practiced, the deep conversations with Clara and Roberta, and the unconditional support he always received from them. Those moments of laughter, tears, and shared dreams shaped not only his art but also his worldview. He realized that friendship was a fundamental pillar in his life, a support that helped him face his greatest fears. And more importantly, he understood that success is more rewarding when shared with those we love. The idea of recording an album began to take shape in his mind, and Nicholas felt a renewed enthusiasm. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but he was willing to face them. With Clara and Roberta by his side, he felt ready for any obstacle. Together, they dreamed of creating something that not only reflected their experiences but could also inspire others to find their own voice. As they walked, Nicholas looked up at the starry sky, feeling grateful for everything he had experienced. He understood that each step, each mistake, and each success were essential parts of his journey. The fear of failure no longer paralyzed him. Instead, it had become a source of motivation. He was ready to start anew and explore new possibilities, knowing that true wealth lay in the experiences and the people around him. Upon arriving home, Nicholas took a deep breath, feeling the peace that came from being truly in tune with himself. He realized that overcoming challenges was a constant in his life, a journey that never ended. Each new day brought the opportunity to learn, grow, and connect even more with those around him. Now, Nicholas wanted to know, what are your achievements and challenges? What have you learned along your path? Share your stories and reflections in the comments, as each experience is an opportunity for learning. Together, we can inspire one another to face our fears and celebrate our victories. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories like this one. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing content that touches the heart and inspires the soul. Let's embark on this journey of self-discovery and overcoming challenges together.